we were raised old school. The principles were very simple. You didn't speak unless spoken to. Children were to be seen and not heard. More importantly, no one really cared what you thought because you weren't an adult, and if you were speaking, then you were acting as if you were an adult. Most people know that my mom was a prostitute. My father was a pimp. My grandmother, schizophrenic. My grandfather was a street hustler. And of course, my aunts and uncles all fell in where they felt comfortable within that line. My grandmother had thrown my mother out of her home after discovering that she was pregnant. As a matter of fact, she tried to beat me out of my mother. When she gave birth to me, she had left me in a heroin house. I was found, as it was told to me, in my own feces. I was found having not eaten for a numerous amount of days. And the only thing that the people around me knew to do was to get me to the hospital. It was through the grace of God that the woman next door to where my mother was residing knew who my grandfather was. After all, he was a street hustler. Shortly thereafter giving birth, I believe my mother may have developed a series of postpartum depression. She got on a bus somehow, some way, and she made her way to Seattle, Washington, never looking back, never really inquiring as to whether or not I lived or whether or not I died. My father was never in the picture. I believe that he knew that my mom was pregnant with me, but of course it wasn't his ideal to come around because he was her pimp. And my father has a history, or should I say he had, a history for frequenting women of the night. The unfortunate part of all of that is that I was left in the hands of a schizophrenic grandmother. Well, that set me on a course to hell. My grandfather didn't know it until it was a little bit too late. I felt like my house was a home of secrets because, again, you walked out the house, you looked amazing. You were well put together, your hair was slicked down, you went to school, you were clean, you were bathed, you articulated your thoughts well, but deep inside, no one knew that every night prior to getting into my bed, my grandmother would put me in a boiling tub of hot water with Epsom salt. She would take a wire brush and she would scrub me down. It was almost as if I was confessing my sins and making a penance at the same time. When she had a rough day, she would beat me for no reason. I could be looking the wrong way. I could be thinking or sitting the wrong way. She swore that I may have said something, and before you knew it, I was flat on my face. By the time I was 8 years old, after suffering the series where my grandmother attempted to actually take my life, where she stabbed me on my living room floor with her butcher knife, I had made a mental decision that enough was enough. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew that I was going to get out of 920 Lafayette. I ran away so much until finally I got caught in the act of shoplifting. I got caught for a series of shoplifting and, of course, pickpocketing. And when I did, they brought me back to my grandmother's house. They served me with charges, and my grandmother appeared in court. She explained to the judge that she could no longer provide for me because she was, quote unquote, ailing in age. Obviously, in my mind, she had been ailing, but to say the least, I saw that as my way out. The state never once blinked. They pretty much labeled me a juvenile delinquent, sentenced me to East Ferry Detention Center in Buffalo, and then from there, they shipped me off to Tryon School for Girls, and then various other institutions up north where I completely lost all freedoms.
From being in what I thought was a healthy home to being abused, molested, raped, sodomized, to being locked up by the time that I was 13, to being incarcerated in a juvenile hall, becoming a juvenile delinquent. Yes, if you Google me, you will see a mugshot or two. And you think your situation is so hard.
All things came to a head roughly about 1994. I decided that Uncle Sam would become my friend. And so I went and enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. And I'm gonna tell you, when I got to boot camp, honestly, it was a cakewalk. And I simply mean that because I grew up in a house where people yelled at me all day long. I'd been tied to a system where people told me what to do at every waking moment. So being in the military was the least of my concerns. What it did do, though, was it shaped me. It gave me drive, it gave me focus, it taught me discipline on a whole nother level. I ended up having 3 children, well, 2 children actually out of wedlock. And of course, my third child, she was born and of course passed away. I didn't know what it meant to truly love a child because I wasn't a child who received love. And so the blessing in my children was they were able to spiritually, physically, and emotionally fill every void that I had gone through as an adolescent. I remember asking God, why? I was raised old school, so we were raised to believe that you didn't ask God why. And so one day I said, listen, I'm gonna actually ask God why. And God told me, I allowed you to endure everything because I knew you could handle it. I allowed you to go through the hurt, the pain, the neglect, the abuse, the emotional devastation. I allowed you to go through it because you had to become my voice. I remember going to New Orleans back in 2005. I had just lost everything out in California, but it was right after Hurricane Katrina. And I remember going on stage at a church out there under one of my friends who was a pastor, and I just told my story. The first time I had ever told my story, and it was as if I could feel the shackles literally falling off of me. But what was more revolting in my spirit was that I had allowed for so many years all that pain to weigh me down. But the most rewarding part of that day was having a man walk up to me, put $50 in my pocket, and tell me that he had been an alcoholic because his father had molested him. And when he put that $50 in my hand, he said, I need you to tell your story wherever you go. He said, because you don't know how many people you will set free. And at that moment, that was confirmation that I had become a voice for the voiceless. I had to use all of my pain to help other people find their purpose. When my audience hears She Speaks, I don't care whether you're a business professional, I don't care whether you're a woman, I don't care whether you're a man, you will have been able to find a way to connect the dots. Whether you're a pastor, whether you're a corporate exec, whether you're a single mom, whether you're a household, a stay-at-home mom, whether you are an athlete, my life, my story, my experiences, my testimony, my lessons learned, all of that enables the average person or the above average person to connect the dots and find themselves. I believe that I am a missing link, helping people connect their past to their present, pursuing their purpose into their future.